My brother once tricked me into cutting short my vacation by fabricating an emergency. In retaliation, I decided to let his kids have free reign in the house. Hey everyone, I never imagined I'd be sharing something like this, but the past few days have been so surreal that I just had to. Get ready for a whirlwind of emotions. I'm a 27-year-old woman who works from home and often babysits my brother Mike's kids. Mike is 33 and has a demanding job as a structural mover in addition to his 40-hour desk job. His wife Sandra is a nurse, so they frequently need someone to look after their two children, Noah, 5, and Susie, 8. Here's some background. Mike and Sandra got pregnant while I was in college, and they moved in with us. My parents' house became a bit of a hectic household. With my mom working too, she'd often insist that, since I was free after classes, I should help out by taking care of Mike's kids. My dad wasn't thrilled about it, but my mom never gave me much of a choice. I initially thought I'd only need to look after the kids for 5 hours until my parents returned home. However, as days went by, my mom continued to ask me to bathe, feed, or put the kids to sleep even when she was back. I didn't hold it against her because I knew she was exhausted too, but I ended up spending 7 to 8 hours a day with the kids. Not only was this unpaid, but it also consumed all my time. Noah and Susie were a handful. They were hyperactive, running around and throwing toys everywhere. If they didn't get what they wanted, they'd start smashing things, and I'd be left to clean up the mess. I wasn't particularly maternal and was quite young myself. As the youngest sibling, I had no clue how to handle children, especially ones who screamed and threw tantrums when things didn't go their way. I voiced my frustrations to my brother multiple times, but he'd always brush it off, saying I was at home anyway and had nothing better to do. This situation seriously impacted my studies. I was too exhausted to finish my assignments after putting the kids to bed. One evening, I had a crucial assignment due, but Noah and Susie wouldn't leave me alone. They kept meddling with my books and laptop whenever I tried to focus. I asked them repeatedly for just 1 hour of quiet time and put on their favorite kids' show to distract them. But Noah escalated things by throwing objects at me, like the remote and pillows from the couch. Susie found this amusing, which only egged Noah on. I firmly told him no, moved whatever he threw out of his reach, and gently explained that we don't throw things. But Noah persisted until he hurled his drinking mug at my laptop, spilling water all over it and rendering it useless. The chaos that ensued in just seconds was unbelievable. My frustration and exhaustion peaked, and I was on the brink of tears. This wasn't just a minor inconvenience anymore. It was severely affecting my academic work and my personal belongings. Desperate to salvage my assignment and maintain my sanity, I took a deep breath, gathered them around, and tried to stay as calm as possible. I explained how important my studies were and the consequences of their actions. Noah stayed defiant, continuing to throw things at me. I felt a deep mix of frustration, anger, and helplessness. I decided to take control of the situation and told Noah he was going to timeout. I turned off the TV and asked him to sit in a corner facing the wall. His eyes widened and he started to cry, but I ignored his protests and put him on the chair. Susie fell silent, sensing the seriousness of the moment. When my brother found out, he was furious. He screamed at me for putting his son in timeout, insisting that I wasn't their parent and had no right to discipline his kids. I tried to calmly explain the situation, stressing how it was impacting my academic responsibilities and the damage done to my laptop. I told him that I needed to get the laptop repaired immediately and that he needed to cover the costs. My brother accused me of being extremely selfish, saying that kids will be kids and I shouldn't blame them or him. He argued that I should have known better than to use my laptop in front of them. I retorted that I was being forced to babysit his kids, which was severely affecting my studies. I explained that I had no choice but to complete my assignments while looking after them, as no one else was willing to help. My brother shouted that we were family and that this wasn't a big deal because they were my niece and nephew. He berated me, saying that punishing his kids would make them dislike me. I told him that was fine. I didn't need them to like me, just to respect me if they were in my care. This infuriated him further, and he claimed that since I was living at my parents' house for free and had no life outside of college, I shouldn't complain about babysitting his kids. He firmly told me that I wasn't allowed to punish them. I snapped back that I was done with him and his kids. My brother was stunned and tried to backtrack, but I told him that if he wanted me to babysit his kids the next day, he would have to either start paying me or find another arrangement. I told him that my services were no longer available and that he could find someone else, since he clearly wanted a pushover doormat for his kids, and that wasn't going to be me. Later that night, my mom barged into my room, demanding that I apologize to my brother and his kids. She insisted that, as a sister, I should support my brother without expecting anything in return, but I stood my ground and refused to back down. I calmly explained that while I loved my brother and his family, my time and efforts were valuable, and I deserved fair compensation for the unexpected babysitting duties. As the tension grew, my dad stepped in to support me. He reminded my mom that I had a right to be compensated for my time and effort, pointing out that babysitting was a significant commitment, not just a small favor. The argument between my parents escalated, with voices growing louder. Eventually, my sister-in-law intervened. She acknowledged the validity of my request and offered to start paying me $50 a day. I refused, stating that this amount was too low for taking care of their kids for 8 to 9 hours each day. They were surprised and questioned the figure I was asking for. I stood my ground and demanded $80 per day, a rate that reflected the time, effort, and stress involved in caring for the kids. My brother called me greedy, but I told him he could find someone else. Reluctantly, they agreed. I also insisted that they cover the cost of my laptop, which their son had destroyed. My sister-in-law agreed, although my mom continued to show her disapproval. The compromise was settled, and the next day marked the start of a new arrangement where I was compensated for my babysitting duties. This continued until I moved out of my parents' house. Initially, my brother insisted that I keep looking after the kids, but he quickly realized it was impractical as I stayed at the office for long hours and didn't get home until 8 p.m. He had no choice but to find another solution. I was no longer regularly asked to babysit his kids, except on rare occasions, which I was okay with because I did love my niece and nephew. Last year, I transitioned to a permanent work-from-home position with a great job that allowed me to move to an affluent neighborhood. I absolutely love my job. It pays well, and I enjoy the flexibility. When my brother found out about my new work setup, he reverted to his old ways, finding excuses to leave his kids with me every day. By this time, I wasn't asking him for money, nor did he ever offer any, thinking this was just a temporary arrangement. Surprisingly, my brother wasn't happy about this situation and went to great lengths to avoid confronting me. He started leaving his kids on my doorstep in the morning and would only call me after he had retreated into his car, leaving me no choice but to take the kids in. In my attempts to address the issue with family, I spoke with my sister-in-law multiple times. She urged me to be more understanding and help out, citing my brother's recent promotion and how he was spread thin. I didn't mind babysitting my brother's kids once or twice a week, but doing it regularly was impacting my job. I realized that he wouldn't change his behavior until I taught him a lesson. The next time he left his kids on my doorstep and called to inform me, I lied and said I wasn't home. I threatened to call the police and Child Protective Services, CPS, for abandoning his kids. He started yelling, demanding that I come back home wherever I was. I told him that if he didn't turn his car around and pick up his kids, he would face the police next time. This ultimatum made my brother speed back and take his kids. Later, my mom and sister-in-law called to tell me that my brother had to miss work because he couldn't find an alternative, and his boss had reprimanded him. My mom blamed me, insisting that since I was working from home, it was my family duty to help out. I retorted that if she wanted to play that game, she should look after his kids herself since she was retired and home all day. This seemed to shut her up. My sister-in-law then offered to start paying me like before, but I told her this time it would be $100. We argued a bit, but she eventually agreed. Since then, I've continued to babysit his kids only after my brother pays me up front. It's been several months and the kids really enjoy spending time with me. A few days ago, my brother asked if I could babysit his kids over the upcoming holidays because he and Sandra were planning a trip with her friends. Normally, I would have agreed, but I already had plans to go to Mexico with my boyfriend and friends. I told him I couldn't do it and suggested he ask our parents. My brother got upset and told me that I was young and could handle looking after the kids, whereas our parents were too old to keep up with his hyperactive children. It's true that my mom has arthritis and my dad has a back problem. I suggested he contact his friends for help. He got upset, explaining how he and Sandra really needed a break and that I could take a break later. I told him that this was my first international trip and I wasn't going to postpone it for his kids. I insisted that I wasn't going to cancel my plans as I needed a break from work. He blew up, yelling that I shouldn't be tired since I just sit at home all day and don't have any kids of my own. I hung up on him after firmly saying no once again. So last weekend, I went on my trip to Mexico with my boyfriend and friends. We were having an amazing time, and I was letting loose after working hard all year. This vacation was well deserved. On the third day, I woke up to 8 missed calls from my brother. Concerned, I called him back immediately. He picked up, sounding panicked, and claimed that Susie wasn't doing well and was having trouble breathing. He told me she was admitted to the hospital and that it was a family emergency. Susie has asthma, so I panicked and my mind went blank. My boyfriend sat up, noticing my reaction. My brother insisted that I needed to come home to be there for Susie. I felt stressed and anxious, trying to get more details about Susie's condition, but my brother was evasive and didn't provide clear information. Torn between my family and my plans, I hung up. My boyfriend and friends were supportive, suggesting we should all return home, but I didn't want to ruin their trip. Feeling worried, I rearranged my plans, booked the earliest flight back, and rushed home, bracing for the worst. Throughout the flight, I tried calling my parents, but they didn't answer. It was still early morning for them, so I assumed they might be sleeping. I asked my brother to pick me up from the airport, and he immediately agreed. When I returned, I found my brother at the airport, looking sheepish and nervous. I asked him to drive me straight to the hospital so I could see Susie for myself and be there for her. He hesitated before finally admitting that there was no emergency. He then revealed that he and Sandra were going on their trip as planned and needed me to babysit their kids. I demanded an explanation, my voice filled with frustration and disappointment. He stammered, trying to justify his actions by saying he thought I wouldn't come back if he told me the real reason. His feeble excuse only intensified my anger. I felt betrayed and used. My concern for Susie turned into resentment towards my brother's manipulative tactics. At that moment, I decided I wasn't going to let this slide. It was time to teach my brother a lesson he would never forget. No more playing games or falling for his tricks. I needed him to understand the gravity of his actions, the emotional toll it had taken on me, and the strain it had put on my life. As we drove to his house, a fire burned within me. When we arrived, my sister-in-law was outside with luggage, looking sheepish. I instantly knew she was part of the plan to trick me into coming back. She hugged me, apologized, and mentioned there was some money for me on their nightstand. Before I could respond, my brother and his wife hurried off to pick up their friends for the trip. Standing there, trying to cool off, I couldn't believe their audacity. I was infuriated by their attempt to manipulate me and trivialize the whole situation. Little did my brother know he was setting himself up for the shock of a lifetime. I was determined to take my ultimate revenge and ensure they would never dare leave me with their children again. As I stepped inside, I tossed responsibility out the window. When Noah and Susie woke up, I told them that for the next 3 days they were allowed to do whatever they wanted in the house. Noah's eyes lit up with excitement as he asked if he could have ice cream in his bed. I told him why not, and that he was free to eat whatever he wanted there. He rejoiced. Susie then asked if she could use her mother's expensive makeup to play dress-up, something her mother had expressly forbidden. I told her she was free to use whatever she wanted. When my parents called me back, I told them what had happened. They were shocked and had no idea my brother had gone to such lengths to coerce me into babysitting his kids. I explained that I had a plan to teach my brother a lesson because of this. My mom asked curiously what my plan was, and I told her I intended to let the kids do whatever they wanted at home. She immediately warned me that this was a bad idea and urged me not to go through with it. However, my dad, who was clearly angry with my brother, encouraged me to do whatever necessary to teach him a lesson. I assured my parents that I would allow the kids to do only harmless things and would ensure they were never in any danger. As you can imagine, the kids went wild and the chaos lasted for 3 days. Noah, filled with excitement, tried to turn the living room into his personal soccer field. His kicks and throws sent objects flying, and the sound of breaking echoed through the house. Meanwhile, Susie and I attempted baking together. For those 3 days, I felt like a child among them, letting them do whatever they wanted. I watched them with a mix of amusement and satisfaction every time they did something they would otherwise never be allowed to do. They were clearly having the time of their lives, while the house, once orderly and clean, was turned upside down. This was my revenge, and it was sweet. I made sure to capture moments of their masterpieces on camera, knowing these images would serve as lasting memories for my brother and sister-in-law. When they returned, their shock was palpable as they took in the state of the house. Their expressions went from stunned to disbelief as they surveyed the aftermath. The once neat and orderly home had become a chaotic playground of creativity. My brother and his wife went ballistic, shouting at me and demanding an explanation for the mess they walked into. "Brother, what on earth happened here? Why is everything in shambles?" "Me? Oh, hey there. Just a little redecorating, courtesy of Noah and Susie." "Brother, redecorating? Are you out of your mind? We trusted you to take care of them, not turn our home into a disaster zone." "Sister-in-law, this is unacceptable. Look at the mess, and what did you let Susie do with my makeup?" "Me? Susie wanted to use them. She's got quite the talent with makeup. Don't you think?" "Brother, stop playing games. This is not what we agreed upon." "Me? Exactly. We didn't agree on anything." My brother's face turned several shades of red as he heard this, and he started shouting even louder. He told me I was being unbelievable and that they trusted me to look after their kids. I scoffed and replied that trust goes both ways. They had tricked me into cutting my trip short so they could selfishly go on their trip. I firmly told him that the mess the kids made could be cleaned up, and he should see this as a lesson never to mess with me again. My sister-in-law demanded that I repay her money for the damage, so I told her that taking care of the kids for 3 days was worth at least $150. I made it clear that I was not going to let them push me around anymore. My brother started to say something, but I cut him off. You know what? This is the last time you will ever see me. I'm done being manipulated, taken for granted, and treated like a doormat. The next time you try to dump your kids on me, I will involve the police and get a restraining order. Consider this the end. Their faces froze, absorbing the gravity of my words. I turned around, gathered my bags, and walked out, leaving behind a house in disarray and a family stunned by the unexpected turn of events. Since then, my brother has been calling me, complaining that he and his wife are now stuck cleaning up and demanding that I apologize to her for being a brat. He blames me for everything and insists he did nothing wrong by calling me back for my trip. Update 1. As expected, my mother reached out to me within a few hours. She demanded that I call my brother and sister-in-law to apologize for being so harsh. She claimed that she had foreseen this situation, which was why she had tried to discourage me. She insisted that the only way to mend things was for me to return the $150 along with an apology. I was floored to hear her siding with my brother, especially when he was clearly at fault. Her relentless berating, without considering my feelings, left me feeling devastated. I cut the call short and haven't picked up her calls since. After discussing everything with my boyfriend, he suggested that I take a short break from my family to sort out my feelings. I think he's right, and I plan on taking some time away from everyone. Update 2. Surprise, surprise. A few days after the chaos, my sister-in-law reached out to me with a subdued apology. She admitted her mistakes and expressed genuine remorse, asking if we could talk things through. She acknowledged that her excitement for the trip had clouded her judgment, leading her to let my brother manipulate and lie to me. She realized how unfair it was to take me for granted and how her desires had blinded her to the consequences. Understanding the gravity of the situation, she offered a sincere apology, recognizing the impact of their actions. She then pleaded with me not to punish the kids for their parents' mistakes, emphasizing that they loved spending time with me and hoped I would reconsider babysitting them in the future. However, I remained firm in my decision. I assured her that I wouldn't be babysitting the kids again, reiterating my unwavering stance on the matter. Despite her hesitation, I decisively rejected the idea, refusing to be swayed by manipulation or guilt trips. I stood firm on the boundaries I had set. I told her that while I appreciated her apology, I believe actions speak louder than words. Hence, neither she nor my brother should depend on me for any babysitting duties in the future. The call ended with a mix of emotions, but I was glad she apologized. Update 3 *. It's been a month since I shared the story about my brother's antics. Things have improved a bit since my sister-in-law apologized. My brother sort of said sorry too, though it didn't seem very heartfelt. My dad had a serious talk with him and gave him a good scolding for messing with me. I haven't responded to his apology yet. On a brighter note, my boyfriend surprised me with a spontaneous trip to make up for the one I had to cut short. We took a road trip to the countryside, and it turned out to be exactly what I needed. The scenic views and peaceful atmosphere helped me unwind from the chaos of the past month. It felt like a breath of fresh air, a much-needed break from the drama. During the trip, my boyfriend and I explored and enjoyed local cuisine. The laughter and shared moments created new memories, overshadowing the recent family issues. I can't help but feel grateful for the thoughtful gesture. It wasn't just about the trip, it was a symbol of understanding and support. It made me realize that even amid family troubles, there are people in my life who genuinely care about my well-being. I still have my brother's half-hearted apology lingering in the back of my mind, but for now I'm choosing to focus on the positive moments and the kindness that surrounds me.